AMC's Interview with a Vampire is a great book adaptation. AMC's The Vampire Lestat is not. And don't come for my throat. This does not mean that I hate the show or that I'm throwing shade at it. I'm just criticizing some parts that I didn't enjoy, and as a book fan, I felt disappointed with it as an adaptation. But let me explain. This is the Savage Garden Talks, and today I bring you my final review for The Vampire Lestat Season 3 of Interview with a Vampire. My rating for this season is 3.5 stars. I wanted to give it 4 stars, but after watching the whole show in one sitting, I did feel like I wanted more. I did not feel satisfied with it. Don't get me wrong, please. I did love this season, especially the way they used music to carry the narrative and how every song was introduced in the story so perfectly well. And Sam Reed did such a splendid job with the songs. He has an incredible vocal range, and of course we got again the perfect performances from Jacob and Delaney and Assad and Eric. I mean, I love this cast so much. Every performance just left me breathless. They are so incredible, and now we also got introduced to Jennifer Ille as Gabriella, and even though I do not like Gabriella, I do love her performance of the character, and sometimes I'm shocked that she doesn't speak like Gabriella, because one of the things that I loved the most about Gabriella in this show was her Italian accent. Is so splendid. So I think Jennifer is amazing as Gabriella, and also Christopher Heyerdahl. He was so incredible as Marius, even though we saw so little of him, but I want to see more of him in the future. And don't even get me started on Joseph Porter. Joseph was everything we Nikki fans ever dreamed for Nikki. He was perfect. I mean, the only thing I regret is that we got so little from him, but he portrayed Nikki so flawlessly. So yeah, I enjoyed this season, and I enjoy the way they cover the responses to abuse and how abuse can guide you through life and how you can break free from it. It was a compelling narrative, but as a book fan, I did not feel satisfied with the way they adapted the actual book where this story comes from. Let me start by saying that Interview with the Vampire Seasons 1 and 2 had many changes that diverged from the source material. But did it change the original essence of the characters and the story? No, it didn't. See, what the writers did so well for Interview with the Vampire is that despite the modifications made to the story that actually brought greater diversity to this universe, they kept the most relevant plot points from the narrative and actually expanded the story we already knew. Let me give you some examples of the things that were changed and yet expanded beautifully this story. Louis's family. In the book, we know only the name of Louis's brother, Paul, but here in the show, we know the name of also his sister Grace and his mother Florence, and they brought this family dynamic for Louis to also represent how these interactions also shaped Louis as a human and as a vampire, and that was absolutely incredible. I could also connect more with Louis and Paul as brothers in this adaptation, and I felt even more deeply Louis's pain for losing his brother. You might say, hey, but Babette Fournier was not adapted into this adaptation. No, yeah, she was adapted. The thing is that you didn't realize it. Grace Dulac took her husband's name after she married, and so she became Grace Fournier. So in this adaptation, Louis's sister takes Babette's place, and she takes the role of showing us how Louis gets more and more detached of humanity, even though he doesn't want to. Louis and Lestat's relationship was also great in this show, because in the books, their relationship is there, but it's more implied and subtextual, but in here, it's extremely explicit since the first moment we met them, and they explore so many queer and domestic dynamics with them that it's impossible to not love this adaptation of Lestat, even with all the violence they incorporated, because Lestat was not that violent to Louis in the books, but that relationship was so greatly adapted and so beautifully queer. Claudia's tragedy was also pretty perfect to me, because yeah, she's not 5 years old like in the books, and to me a book accurate Claudia could never be portrayed on screen, because you cannot possibly ask a 5-year-old actor to portray the dark and complex character that Claudia is. So yeah, they aged Claudia up and they made her a teenager, but her struggles are still there. She's still infantilized by everyone around her because they see her as a child, and she cannot escape that teenage-shaped body, and she will always have to carry that with her. So even though she doesn't have the same age and she does have a lot more liberty that she does in the books, she's still trapped in a juvenile body that doesn't allow her to live her vampiric life as much as she wanted to. And all of the characters were aged up, but that was for the better because many of the characters are pretty young in the books, and so some dynamics couldn't be possibly portrayed by young actors in the show. So I'm glad they aged them up, and that actually works for the series. So yeah, that was a good change as well. Then there's the Theatre of the Vampires, and they blow our minds away with it. I mean, they brought such creative and amazing place to screen, and they gave each character a name and a backstory. So it was incredibly interesting to explore the theater of the vampires and to see how they portrayed this Grand Guignolesque theater on television. Louis and Armand's relationship was pretty different to how it was in the books, but it gave us the opportunity to see that relationship being explored and to see everything they went through in those 77 years they were together. So even though it is not exactly like in the books, it is explored and it is expanded, and you can connect to that relationship because you have the time to see it developed. It also happens similar with the interviews because of course in the books there is only one interview, but the fact that they split that interview from the book in two so that an older Daniel can objectively explore and question Louis's story was incredibly attractive and interesting. And also the way they adapted the first interview and they incorporated Armand into it and basically gave the beginning of Devil's Minion was amazing and exciting to us book readers. Of course, there were also huge alterations like Armand's involvement in both interviews and his willingness to kill Louis in the trial. There was also the fact that in this version of the story, Louis is the one that slits Lestat's throat. And even though I would have loved to see Claudia slitting Lestat's throat and then stabbing him because she's such a fierce vampire, this was also great because it added more to the gothic romance dynamic they had through the entire season 1. But these changes only made us book readers more immersed in the story because we were following the narrative we already knew through expanded plot twists and dynamics that were so interesting to follow. And unfortunately, the Vampire Lestat enormously failed on that. The book narrative we were all anxiously expecting to see was not expanded at all, but actually reduced to condensed and rushed short flashbacks. And this season didn't only have tiny mischaracterizations, but huge mischaracterizations that may feel some characters completely different to their book versions. Yes, it is true, this season had many budget restraints, but I don't think this is a good enough excuse because, I was not expecting to see, for example, Lestat, Armand and Gabrielle's interaction in Notre Dame because I know how expensive it is to travel to another location, but they could have done so many good things with simpler interior design settings. And instead of expanding the story, they gave us these weird changes like Lestat willingly killing his family, which by the way he didn't in the books. He wasn't able to kill his own father and he was actually devastated when he learned that the revolutionaries killed most of his family. I would understand Gabriella wanting to kill the Marquis and all of that because there is a more trauma connection there, but Lestat wanting to kill his family takes apart all of that humanity that book Lestat has. As much as I loved Rockstar Lestat, I wish we would have seen less of him Because the Vampire Lestat book is like 95% of Lestat's backstory and like 5% of Rockstar Lestat. I think it's wonderful they decided to expand this Rockstar narrative and give us this tour and all of these amazing songs. But it did feel like a sacrifice to exchange, his backstory with a lot of new plot points for the present and his Rockstar tour. Like, we didn't need to see Lestat telling a police officer that his band members needed cocaine to function. We didn't need to see Gabriella having sex at all. We didn't need to see a whole long scene of Gabriella and Lestat being in a strip club. These moments could have been spent in focusing on Lestat's story of him telling what shaped him as a person. Like, for example, Nicola, we got so many little of him and he was so important for Lestat's life, and we barely saw anything of him. And they've been teasing Nikki since season 1, so that's why I was expecting a bigger role for him this season, but it felt like it was not enough. It was not enough to understand and to connect with him and Lestat's story. There's also the whole incest thing with Gabriella. In the books, yes, Gabriella and Lestat do have an incestual dynamic after Lestat turns Gabrielle into a vampire. But it's something brief, it's not something that lasts centuries. I mean, they kiss like 2 times. And it's more of like a liberation for both Lestat and Gabriella from the human constraints they always had. Before that, they never had any incestual dynamics. Before that, Gabrielle was just a cold and distant mother to Lestat. So even though I did like the way they explore Lestat's abuse response to Gabriella, I do think they could have incorporated more of their dynamic in the books. And how Gabriella, she leaves him and she's distant and cold, but she's not this pervert and sex-feeding monster that is always abusing him and is always fetishizing him. That was absolutely horrific. That's why I liked that they changed Gabrielle's name to Gabriella, because to me they are 2 completely different characters that are similar in some selected aspects. So yeah, I'm glad they have 2 different names because they are not the same character. The Devil's Road and Marius were also roles that were extremely condensed and mischaracterized in this season. Because in the books, Lestat was anxiously looking for Marius throughout all of Europe because he wanted to get vampire knowledge. Because, Magnus abandoned Lestat and he didn't get like an education of the life of the vampire, and he wanted to learn more of it, and he knew Marius could give him those answers. And then when he finally finds Marius, they have such an amazing bond because Marius could relate to Lestat in the way he was transformed, because Marius' transformation was also pretty much non-consensual in the books, and they bonded with their stories, and Marius told so many great things to Lestat, and Lestat learned so many great things from Marius. But in here, Marius was pretty much irrelevant for Lestat. He just left Lestat with those who must be kept, which was very much out of character for Marius to do. And so you miss the opportunity to connect with these characters in the same way you do in the books, because you don't get enough time with them, since they decided to focus more with Lestat and his rock band. So Marius and Nikki, and they felt so insignificant. Also Armand, they didn't explore Armand and Lestat's relationship in the same way they explore Louis and Lestat's relationship, or Louis and Armand's relationship. I mean, they pretty much skimmed over Armand and Lestat's dynamic. So everything felt so rushed and so condensed that I actually didn't have time to connect with Lestat's story as much as I did in the books. I connected with him more in regards to his story with Louis and his story with Gabriella, which they decided to focus on that a lot. But his actual origin story was not really and perfectly covered. I do need to say that even though I wanted to see more of Magnus and the way he just threw himself through the flames and he danced as he was being burned, I did like how they portrayed Lestat's transformation. Like, that music video was absolutely so random, but perfectly fitted the narrative, and also the way they compare Lestat's transformation to the abuse that Claudia endured left no question that that was an actual and direct metaphor to assault that Lestat suffered, an assault when he was turned into a vampire. Akasha was also incredibly phenomenal. Like, she was a lot more active than she was in the books, because in the books she really is a stone. But I loved her so much. I do wish we could have seen like this huge and elegant and beautiful sanctuary Marius had for her and Enkill. But even though we didn't get that, I loved it. I mean, she was so incredible. And I also would have liked seeing Lestat maniacally playing the violin and she arising from that interaction. But even though we didn't get it, I mean, everything was so incredibly breathtaking that I cannot really complain about her adaptation, because I really enjoy it. It felt more similar to what they did for Interview with a Vampire. It was changed, but it was still compelling. It is also ironic that Claudia's seance was one of the most book accurate scenes in this season, and it's not even from the Vampire Lestat, it's from the book Merrick. So another book got a better adaptation than the Vampire Lestat. That is insane. So yeah, like I told you in the beginning, I enjoyed the season. I love this casting, and I will continue to watch this show, because even though I don't like some parts of the story, I will always love this casting. And I love the other production departments, like the set designs are so stunning, and the costumes are incredibly beautiful. But like I said, instead of expanding the story like what they did with Interview with the Vampire, they just incorporated a whole bunch of new elements that weren't really necessary, and they schemed and condensed the actual story that we were expecting. This is why this is my rating for this season, because even though I love the show, I also love the books, and I would have loved to see more of this book adapted into screen. So yeah, I did feel let down by this season, but don't get me wrong, I'm still excited for season 4. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with Akasha. I have some concerns regarding Akasha and the twins, but I'll talk about them in another video that I make later. But that being said, I don't hate the show, I just felt disappointed. Those are my true feelings, and I have the right to share them with you as a fan. So stay tuned, because you will see more of me and more videos of me talking about these books and this adaptation, because I love them so much. And so, see you soon.